Lesson 3, we will be discussing the scientific method. At the end of the session, students are expected to explain the process of scientific method and cite practical application. And we will also enumerate the possible sources of research topic. So the topic scientific method is already discussed in your lower years. So somehow this topic is some sort of review to you. Okay, so science or the word science comes from the Latin word scire, correct? Okay, so we've been discussing science since elementary and probably some grade 7. And the word science means scire. It's a Greek word scire, diba? Scire. And this word scire means to know. Okay, which means to say science is a broader sense of knowing. It's a vast knowledge. So meaning, if we are dealing with science, our main goal or our main objective is to contribute to the body of knowledge. And in science, we always find new discovery, new ideas, and new concept as we are aspiring to know everything that happens around us. So in science, we are experimenting, we are first observing, and when we say observing, we are using our 5 senses. We are inferring and we are also predicting. Okay, so those are some of the science skills, correct? So you've already have those topic when you were in grade 7. So observing and inferring are 2 different terms. When you say observing, you are making a statement based on what you see, based on what you smell, and based on what you taste. So meaning you're using your 5 senses. When you are making an inference, you are giving meaning to what you have observed. Okay. So let's expand those topics as we go on with our discussion on scientific method. So the scientific method, what is it all about? Okay, so it's a method, meaning it is a process. Generally, when we say scientific method, it speaks about the process of doing science, meaning to say scientific method is the process of a scientist, of a researcher to come up with a new knowledge or new idea, which means to say in your conduct of research, we are performing scientific method. And this is very essential. Why did I discuss this topic again? Because this topic is very essential in conducting your research. Probably you have the idea of what are those methods, but sometimes we fail to apply its we fail to apply its true essence. Meaning gamba lang kita sa scientific method, but when we are doing our research, we failed to use or to apply the scientific method in the actual process. Okay, so when we say scientific method, it is a step-by-step, okay, a step-by-step, a systematic way of solving problem. So butang mo ding general niya nga meaning, it is a systematic way of solving problem. When we say systematic, the word systematic class means step by step, meaning to say you cannot proceed to step 3 unless you are done with step 1 and 2. To pareho bala when you are cooking rice o magtigang ka. First is you wash the rice. So hindi man pwede nga you measure the water before mo i-wash. Okay, so i-wash mo siya danay. Then, of course, first ano i-measure mo gali ang amount of rice. So basic din na. Measure mo amount of rice. And if wala pa na tinluan ng imong rice cooker, okay, you clean first the rice cooker, then you measure the amount of rice nga tigangon mo, then ibutang mo sa rice cooker. The next step, you pour a certain amount of water. After pouring the water, you wash the rice, then you measure the level of the water for the rice, then butang sa rice cooker. Butang sa rice cooker or i-plug in mo siya. Things like that. Or i-on mo. Saksak mo siya, kag i-on ang rice cooker. So those are step-by-step process. And in real life, we are applying this scientific method. Mag-ilis sang bayo, di ba? Step-by-step manina. Ubra ka sang assignment for the day. Or bisan mag-organize ka sang imong tuludan. Okay, it's always step by step. So we are always applying the word systematic because if you are systematic and organized, you cannot find, it will be convenient on your part since you foresee what are the things to be done and what are the things which are not yet done. Okay, so when we say scientific method, it is the step someone takes to identify a question, develop a hypothesis, design and carry out steps or procedures to test the hypothesis, and write down data and draw a conclusion. So these are the steps in scientific method. So in other words, when we say scientific method, it's simply a way of solving a problem. Okay. Again, scientific method is a way to solve a problem. So scientists take time to think logically when they are investigating a question or problem. So they break things down into many steps to make sense. So before they come up with a solution, it undergoes a lot of process, a lot of thinking on where to start to come up with a solution. And always in the process of scientific method, it always starts with a problem. Correct? Amo na gani class ang irony because most of the students find it difficult to come up with a research problem. So their major problem is a research problem. Okay, so that is when a problem becomes a problem. And that is true because finding a research topic is very hard because there are so many problems in the world. There are so many problems in the environment. We're all surrounded by problems, meaning if you are curious and if you are keen observer, you can come up with a very good solution for a specific problem, just like what we are experiencing now. So our major problem today, magamba ka gani nga problem, it's not necessarily a problem of money, problem of boyfriend, problem of whatever, though they are considered problem. But this is scientific problem, meaning these problems refers to the issues and concerns that we are facing today. Just like, so meaning to say, you need to follow the trend. And one of those problems that we are facing is, of course, COVID. Okay? So our problem is COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so how would you contribute as a researcher? What are the things that you're going to do in order to solve COVID-19 pandemic? So as a student, you cannot generally solve the whole problem, but what is your contribution to solve this problem? Meaning, you don't need to solve the problems of the Philippines. What you're going to do is, if this is the bigger scope or the bigger problem, you just need to contribute single solution, and that would make sense. Okay? Isang dot lang ng imo na contribute, that is already a contribution to the body of knowledge. So if this is the body of knowledge, or if this is the bigger problem, this is your solution. And that makes sense anyway. Okay? Okay, so of course, in performing a certain experimentation or in performing a scientific method, it requires a lot of thinking. And research is not done overnight. Again, research is not done overnight. It is not possible to come up with a title if you will be asked to present it tomorrow. The reason why I am exposing you to the different examples of topic or different examples of study wherein you can think of a possible area to explore in your respective research topics or research problem. Okay, so here are the steps in performing scientific method. So number one step is, of course, we need to identify the problem. What is the problem all about? What is the cause of this problem? Okay, so mabaka nga problem, it refers to, okay, ano gid mo ang problema? How nga identify namon ang problem? When we say of problem, it could be any conflict, okay, or any difficulty. Okay, a conflict, a difficulty, a suffering, or anything which is not convenient to you can be considered already a problem. Example, when you're wearing your skirt, gutok ang skirt mo. That is a problem. Kay gutok na ya imo nga skirt, gutok na ya imo PE uniform. So what could be the solution? There are so many alternatives. One is madayat ka. Gutok ang bayo mo. So kailangan mo mag-fit sa bayo mo. Or number two solution, patahi kaliwat sang bayo. Okay? So those are example of simple problem and solution. Okay, let's have number two. So number two, we will gather information and form a hypothesis. So from the given problem, are there existing studies already about this problem? If there are so many solution already provided for the given problem, meaning to say, hindi ka na find pa sang solusyon sa amo na nga problem kay damo na nagpropose ang solusyon dira, meaning find another problem. Example for this problem is studies related to antibacterial. Ang mga antibacterial study class sa pagka-obsolete na ina. Damo-damo na nga mga students ang nagkandak sang study sang antibacterial, antimicrobial, halin sa leaf sang oregano hasta sa roots sang oregano at to sa different types of plant, kadamo na nag-explore sang antibacterial study. So I would like to highlight or I would like to emphasize that if you will be proposing a study later on, please do not dwell on antibacterial alone. Di lang yung antibacterial ang inyong study. Expand your study because there are so many studies and good studies to propose. Okay? Kaya again, this study is already obsolete. Meaning to say, sa 300 nga nag-graduate, for example lang 300 nga students, butang ta daw 290 ginadangan tay bacterial. So hindi ka na mag-explore, kaya damo-damo na nag-explore sa nga mo nga study. Now let's have number 3. After you come up with the information and you formulate a hypothesis, you are going to perform the experimentation, or you need to test the hypothesis. When you say test your hypothesis, it is the conduct of your study, or you need to perform your experimentation. And number 4, while you are doing your experiment, you need to collect the data and observation based on your experiment. Meaning to say, you're going to have a record book when you are conducting your research. Take ka sang picture because you need that one. Those are your evidence. Okay. Without an evidence, no one would believe that you perform your study. Meaning to say, bisan mag-inano ka pa class ka, hambal sa ako nga, ma'am, nag-perform ako yung ma'am promise, gidya, nag-perform cross my heart, ma'am, nag-perform ako sang study ko. If you have not shown any proof or evidence that you have conducted your study, wala sang mapati. Your teacher will not consider your conduct as a valid experimentation, meaning taking of photo and recording of data is very essential while you are performing a certain experimentation. Tandaan gid na ha, that is very essential. And isa pa gid class, sometimes mo baga, ay ma'am, mga akon nga data nga na record na dula, ma'am, kay gisulat ko sa papel. Okay, what do you think will be the reaction of the teacher? So obviously, aliwaton ka gid sang conduct. Hindi pwede class nga ma-reason out ka lang sang mga bagay nga daw ka, what do you call this, mga daw ka irresponsible nga rason. Meaning to say, as a researcher, it is your task to, or it is your responsibility to make sure that during the experimentation, na-secure mo ang data, because that is the essential part of the conduct. Nag-conduct gani ikaw para maka-generate ikaw sang data. Tapos dulaon mo lang ang data. I think that is kumbaga, irresponsible on the part of the researcher. And I think if the teacher will decide to make the researcher conduct the study again, that is very reasonable. Reasonable gid nga paliwaton ka sang conduct if wala ka sang data nga na record. Okay? Usually when a researcher is conducting the study, naga-record siya, naga-video record, para if you failed to recall the process on how you conduct it, may ara ka nga hawid. I think this is very common sense naman inya. Dapat ara ka, ara ang data, ang baka nga data na record mo mga height and weight, na record mo na measure mo, mga taran mo nga kinahanglan nga data na record mo, na take picture mo isa-isa. Okay? So that is very essential. And right after data gathering, you need to draw a conclusion. And from this, before you can draw your conclusion, you need to interpret the data. And this process, before this, sometimes may ginadugang na diri nga data interpretation. So we have here analysis and interpretation of data, because you cannot come up with a conclusion without interpretation of data, or without further analysis of the data. And right after drawing out the conclusion, you need to share your findings. What form is this sharing of findings? Meaning, as a student researcher, you will have your final defense. Okay. And sa final defense, this is the final step wherein you will be presenting your study, you will be presenting the method of the conduct of the study, as well as the result of the study. This is the final step, or this is the verdict. If you have conducted your study completely without error, or if you conducted your study nando pasapayan lang class nga void and not valid. So diri ni makita tanan-tanan. If you are showing pictures in the conduct of study, pictures don't lie. Tanaan niyo na. Pictures don't lie. It is a proof. It is your stronger proof or your strongest weapon when you are having your final defense. Meaning, if during the final defense, you have shown only samples, tapos wala mo lang nakita kung pilagid to ang data nga na-gather mo, so that is questionable, meaning your study is somehow not reliable. So, importante sa final defense that you will be presenting your study in a very transparent manner. Meaning kung ano ang natabo sa experimentation, amo ginaimo nga ginconduct or amo ginaimo gin-present. Okay, next. So asking questions. Usually mag final defense you are asked of different questions to test if you really know your study. And in the process of scientific method, or in the process of coming up with a certain topic, we are always asking for questions. It's always a question of why and how. So these are questions of higher order thinking skills. So nga, kag paano, how and why. Okay, how are things made? Muna siya. Nga nag-amo na siya nga ang lightning comes before the thunder. Okay, so those are the critical thinking skills that you need to develop in order to come up with a very good topic. So does exercise makes your heart beat faster? O have you tried this? Mag-jogging ka, why is it nagka-palpitate? What causes those things? So that is being curious of the things that surrounds you or the things that's happening around you. Next, do plants need water to grow? Okay, so basic lang ang mga question. And all investigation starts with a question. And this question leads to your problem. And if you know your problem, you can now have your conduct of research. So hindi ka conduct plus kung why ka ti problem. Hindi ka come up with problem if you don't keep asking questions. And you keep on observing the things that's happening around you and ask questions self mo. Hindi lang man nga ang problem comes with what you think. It could be a question from the people around you. Okay, later we will be discussing the criteria for selecting a research topic, and it could help you in determining a problem. Okay, example, what question could these children be investigating? Okay, different ang plants. So it could be, what are they predicting to happen? So obviously, since different ang heights ng plant, they are experimenting the growth of plant. Okay. And they could probably investigate the fertilizer or the amount of sunlight. So there are so many things that you can give meaning to this picture. It's either the students are experimenting the amount of sunlight or the amount of water given to the plant. Kaya the same man ang amount sa ilang soil. Okay? So as a researcher, you are the one to decide what topic or what problem are you going to address. Meaning ang bida sa pagkandak sang study are the researchers. Okay, and what is a hypothesis? So generally, hypothesis is an educated guess. It is a prediction or what you think is going to happen in your experiment. Example, I think that the metal items will be the best conductor of electricity. So this is hypothesis. You use the word think because you are not yet sure. You are just giving your prediction. So no hypothesis is incorrect. Tanan nga hypothesis correct because it is based on your own prediction or your own opinion of what is about or what will happen to a certain experiment. Okay. So why are we predicting? We are giving our prediction or we are giving hypothesis because you need to give reason why your hypothesis is correct. You're giving reason on what are the possible outcome of your study. So example, nagamba ka to nga, ang first mo kagina nga example, di ba, nagamba ka, I think that the metal items will be the best conductor of electricity. What makes you propose that type of hypothesis? Meaning, dapat is a class ang hypothesis based man sa logic. Hindi man pinalagpat. Tanawon mo man kung gaangot-angot man ang mga bagay-bagay. Okay, so you have that hypothesis because metal is used in wires at home. So nag-come up ka nga, okay, ang metal, guro good conductor, kay mostly ang heater mo is made of metal. Ang mga spoon and fork, okay, made of metal and many other. And obviously the wires na nagakadak sa electricity are made of metal. So those are your basis, meaning hindi pinalagpat mag-ubra sang hypothesis. You have the basis in making your hypothesis. And it should be based on logic, pinag-isipan. And ang pinakanami na da class with common sense. Okay? So take note that in making a hypothesis, it should be based on logic. It should be based on reasoning, pinag-isipan. Okay. Next, what are these two finely dressed children investigating? So ang little boy, may ara siya din nga paper. And this is example, a ball or a stone. Ang na natin stone. And they drop both at the same height. What are they investigating? So probably they're investigating which will fall faster. So remember the experimentation of Galileo in the Tower of Pisa. Ginhulog niya ang duwa ka stone because long time ago, according to Aristotle, there is a contradicting view with regards to the view of Aristotle and Galileo. So according to Aristotle, if you have a heavy stone and this is a light stone or smaller stone, the heavy stone will fall faster than the lighter one. But according to Galileo, they will fall at the same time. And Galileo proved this one, nagdaon si Galileo sa iyang claim by performing this kind of experiment at the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Okay, I think you're familiar with that already. So what is a hypothesis? So again, hypothesis is an educated guess. So it's not just a guess, but educated guess, meaning it is based on reasoning, logic, and deeper thinking. Meaning may common sense kag pinag-isipan. Okay, next, in designing an experiment, the next step a scientist take is to create and conduct an experiment to test their hypothesis. So when we say conduct of experiment, this is actually, class, the heart of the research process. Nga, ma'am, ba't ang heart of research process, ma'am? Because when you fail to have this experimentation, your study will have no meaning. Meaning, wala kaya nag-conduct wala kaya nag-contribute, wala ka sang may ma-generate na data if you cannot conduct your experimentation. Meaning, it's good as, or it's safe to say, nga, why kaya nag-research? Why ka man yan nag-conduct? Okay? And this is very important because if there is an error, di patay research mo. So it's the heart of the research process, because this is the step wherein you are verifying, or you are acting like a real scientist, and you are generating a body of knowledge. Okay, so in every experiment, we change one thing, and this is called variable. Specifically, the one being changed is what we call our independent variable. Tandaan siya, it is being manipulated and it is being experimented. Example, I will only change the kind of metal used in my experiment to test which is a better conductor of electricity. So basically, if you already know that metal is a good conductor, so what type of metal? There are different types of metal. So if you're going to change the kind of metal, this kind of metal is your independent variable. Next, how do I make it fair test? A fair test, okay, meaning, mabaga nga fair test, you have eliminated the biases. Okay, so there is no bias in your actual experimentation. So a fair test is when we keep everything the same except the variable. So everything is constant. So this fair test could be attributed to your controlled variable. Amo na ka-importante ang controlled variable. Okay. Example, I will only change the kind of metal. Okay, ang test mo is the kind of metal. And everything will be put in constant. Like example, constant ang length ng metal, ang weight ng metal, ang environment where you expose it, ang voltage nga gamiton, so things like that. So those are examples of constant variable. What are these children investigating? Okay. So ang isa siguro, this is cement. Okay, example. Okay, sorry. Okay, example, this one is cement and this is wood, or probably, or brick. The researcher is probably exposing these two bricks under the heat of the sun to test if diin ang dasig mala, or which is the best brick. Is it made of cement or something made of wood, or di nang mas ano siya ng dugay ma-break. Okay, so amo na siya. Brittle, okay, which has brittle property. Okay, so what do you think are the variables in the study, and how did they make a fair test? So if fair test, they have equivalent ang length or ang size ng bricks para mas ma-compare mo, and they have equal exposure to sunlight. Meaning, if you expose the cement for 2 hours, dapat amuman sa may wood or sa brick. Okay. After doing the experiment, a key to experiment is observing what happens and writing it down. So recording is very important. Gathering information or data is very important. So naliwat-liwat tagid ha. Gathering information or data is very important. Write it down so it is readable and makes sense to other people who read it. So if doktor ang agi mo, make sure that when you are recording the data, it should be readable. Mabasahan sang tanan. So that you can come up with a good interpretation of your result. Nagsulat ka man tuod example, wala man pulos ang sulat mo kay hindi man mabasahan. So, okay, dili naman kita ma-fall sa ginatawag nga the attitude of a good researcher. Okay, what are the results of my experiment? So after the experiment, you need to write in details what happened in your experiment. Ano natabo? Example, what happened? The materials that were made out of metal made the bulb light up brightly. However, the materials which are not made of metal did not make the bulb light. So this is the result of your study. So again, ang result, ang material kuno nga made of metal made the bulb lighten up brightly, while those materials which are not made of metal did not make the bulb light. So based pa lang sa imo nga statement, maka-come up ka na sang result sang study. Okay, you need to look back at your hypothesis and see if you were correct. That is the purpose of writing the hypothesis, to check if your assumptions, mabagad yung hypothesis plus it could be assumptions, it could be prediction. So your hypothesis or your assumption or your predictions, you need to check that if correct. So example, are your results, okay, are your results correct of what you predicted? And ang iya di, yes, I thought that the metals would be the best conductor of electricity. And the result of my experiment proved that this was true. Meaning your hypothesis with regards to the metal being a good conductor is correct. Okay, so that is for conclusion. Then explain why your hypothesis was correct or not. You need to explain, meaning you give reason why your hypothesis was right or wrong. So this is where you're going to create interpretation or conclusion. So, mabaka therefore, wala na sang I conclude. Ha? Take note that. Therefore is already, the word therefore already implies a conclusion. Meaning, mabaka, I conclude that all of the materials that were metal made the bulbs light. All of the materials that were not metal did not make the bulb light, except for the pencil lead. Kaya yung lead niya is may properties ang metallic man. So meaning, mabaka nga therefore, wala na I conclude, or therefore, all the materials that were metal made the bulbs light. So, things like that. So this is how you're writing a conclusion. Then, right after doing the experimentation, in some cases, you need to verify the result of the study, meaning you need to repeat, especially if you are not contented with the result of the study. So you need to verify. Pero if you put things clearly, wala man sang error, there's no need to repeat, especially if mahal ang costs ng study mo, especially if mahal ang mga laboratory equipment and and the variables needed for the study. So no need to repeat. So verification or the repetition of the study is an option. Okay. So you're checking out to make sure everything is valid and will happen again and again. So kung wala na verification, we are using certain trials. Meaning, wala ka lang nag-come up with only one setup. Usually, there are 3 setup. We call that replicates. Meaning, katatlo mo gin come up ang setup to validate the data or to validate the result of the data. So once a scientist completes an experiment, they often repeat to see if they get the same findings or result. So again, the verification of the data could be optional. Kaya consider makita class ng mahal ang mga material and variables being used in the conduct of the study. Okay, make sure to share or to publish the result of the study. So scientists share their experiments and findings with others. So scientists can learn from each other and often use someone's experience to help them with what they are studying or doing. Meaning, most scientists publish their work. Amo na class nga ang inyo naman yung part to share, ginabookbind in a thesis form. And you cannot graduate sa SSC or cannot move up sa SSC without this hardbound of your thesis. Okay, so here are the possible sources of research. Okay, so isa-isahon siya natin. So the following are the possible sources of research. First is personal experience, meaning you've come up with this type of research because you yourself experienced this one. Example, we have the researcher Lian and Nikki. So Lian has a relative with severe diabetes, and Nikki's lola was amputated due to the same illness. This lead to the researcher this inspire. So the researcher got this inspiration to study the hyperglycemic activity of batuan. Mambagkang hyperglycemic activity, it will determine diabetes. So kung taas ang glycemic niya, meaning ga-triggers ang diabetes. Kung lower, meaning it's a good indicator for curing diabetes. So that is based on personal experience because Lian has a relative with diabetes and Nikki's lola was amputated. Gincut iyang knee or kung ano nga parts ng body niya due to diabetes. So sila, kin-experience nila, they come up with a solution for diabetes. So this is an example of a study related to personal experience. Okay, second, we have existing problem in the workplace. Meaning, workplace could be in the community or in your place. Find a solution sa imong place dira. Example, your problem is potable water or drinking water, then you find how are you going to solve that certain problem. Example here, the contamination of lead and cadmium in Iloilo River was very alarming due to its effect in marine ecosystem. So Jao Garcia got this idea to formulate his study on the phytoremediation of these heavy metals. So baka nga phytoremediation, you are remediating or you are giving solution to the physical properties of water. Okay, so mga chemical properties, the lead and cadmium. Kay alarming siya kuno ang this contamination actually of Iloilo River is based on the presence of lead and cadmium. So with that, nag-create isang solution, and that solution is finding for the phytoremediation, or what are the possible solution for to remediate these heavy metals. So that is an example of a study on the existing problem in the workplace. Next, number 3, technological and scientific advancement. Example, crime rates increases due to lack of security systems in some establishments. So common din siyang crime rate. With this idea, Christine thought of making an alternative security system which is cheaper than CCTV. Kaya kamahal man sang CCTV, therefore, to come up with a security system which is cheaper, nag-create siya sang iya nga alternative. So that is a technological and scientific advancement. And mostly, in this type of study, this is under robotics and intelligent machines. Okay. Next, offshoots of other researchers. Example, the effect of radiation on human body were the center of China's study. In her study, she used oyster shell. So kay China, oyster shell. And this oyster shell is used in shielding radiation. With this idea, Kent and his teammates thought of utilizing eggshell waste. So kay Shaina is oyster. Kay Kent and his teammates, nagamit sila sang eggshell waste in shielding radiation. Meaning, nag-find siya other alternative to solve certain problem. So that is offshoots of other researchers. Next, suggestions from colleagues and administrator or teacher. Example, Professor Dayan is working on antimicrobial property of ginger. So her colleague, Dr. Cruz, suggests that she should use a gram-positive bacteria like actinobacteria instead of E. coli. Ang E. coli, obsolete naman ni class. So, hindi ka na mag-explore diri. Pero usually, some students opt to use E. coli kaya mas barato siya than other variable or other bacteria available. Okay, so in this, nagsuggest si Dr. Cruz to use the gram-positive bacteria like actinobacteria, and this is somehow sophisticated, or this makes the study sophisticated than using only E. coli. So this is based on the suggestion of colleagues or co-teacher or administrator. Okay, next. Next is professional journals, seminars, symposia, or conferences. So kay online subong probably mga webinar or sa YouTube. Very powerful ang YouTube. You can scan or browse their mga studies or Google kadamo sa mga literatures available. So example, we have James attended the National Research Conference in Tagaytay City last November 2017. The topics being discussed in the conference was about the trends and issues in research. With this, he planned on studying nanoparticles. So class ka namin, ini siya if you're attending certain seminars, you can get or grasp idea from mga scientists din mismo in the field. Therefore, it's a very nice exposure if you will be exposed to this area. So, kay didto siguro probably sa gin-attenan niya nga conference, gin-discuss ang nanoparticles. So with that, James is curious on how these nanoparticles work. So gin-push through or gin-pursue niya ang study. Okay, next, the field of specialization. Okay, paano naman kung if you're expert on that field or if you have known someone expert on that field, you need to explore that. Example, Dr. Ramos specialized in aquaculture studies. So his daughter, Micaela, is a grade 8 student. Example, grade 8 student of Iloilo National High School and presently formulating a research study. With this, Micaela proposed a study on feed additives to boost the immune system or the immune response of shrimp. Meaning to say, Micaela proposed a study related in aquaculture because si father niya is expert on that field. Meaning, if dira siya ma-explore sa aquaculture, mag-guide siya sa iyang father sa technicalities. So meaning may mag-guide sa iya sa technicalities ang iya nga study, and that is an edge or an advantage in most of the researcher. If you have known someone which is expert on that certain field. Next is organizational structure and policies. So for now, we have CIFDEC and the UP Visayas, University of the Philippines Visayas, SOCTEC, School of Technology. So we have School of Technology and CIFDEC. So duwa pa lang aton plus may ara kita nga MOA, or we call that Memorandum of Agreement, wherein if you will be conducting your studies later on, these two institutions will have an open hand for you to guide in conducting your study. And example, sa UP, somehow, though gamay lang ang ilang gina-charge, like ang laboratory fee is only 500 pesos. And there is no professional fee, unlike various institutions such as ang SANAG nagahatag na siya klasang professional fee. And most of the researchers, mga student researchers naton, ginapabayad sila sa professional fee. So kindly select the best institution wherein you will conduct your study at a minimum cost. Okay? So we also have here, kung ang study mo is on aquaculture, you go sa CIFDEC. If your study is related on radiation and mga mga nuclear di man yan nuclear weapon, mga anything regarding mga related sa radiation. Okay, we have PNRI, and PNRI is Philippine Nuclear Research Institute. Mga what else pa na mga sa PNRI, ang mga shielding, radiation, mga muna, and many others pa man. And literature sources, example, the best type of study today is on coronavirus and COVID vaccine because this has limited studies. Kaya bago siya mo trend, so that is an example of literature sources. So wala pa sang literature available for that, meaning you will really contribute to the body of knowledge. If there are so many literatures regarding the study you are proposing, please change. I-change mong study kaya hindi na siya on trend or di na siya in. And next, we have clinical specialization. Example, Dr. Cruz and his team is working on clinical trial of a newly developed drug to cure diabetes. With this, they gather other scientists and experts on this field to verify the result of the study. Meaning, my clinical specialization, they are really, this type of research is best applied to mga resident scientists na gid. So siguro sa inyong level, we cannot have this kay we are not yet we don't have that proper training for clinical experimentation. Ang baga nga clinical class, mga clinical studies, these are studies conducted which is pwede siya balaklas na i-adapt for human consumption, gamiton siya as vaccine for for example, for COVID. That is clinical experiment, meaning you're doing the experiment for the sake of production a drug. So sa inyo nga level as high school student, we are not encouraging you to develop certain drug or certain medicine. Ang ginaobrata lang is alternative solution. Kaya kung mag-develop ka sang medicine, it takes a lot of process pag-verify sang result. You need BFAD, damo pa na siya. So kung gusto mo nga mahapos ang life mo sa research, propose only a simple study which is doable, not impossible. Doable, dapat pwede i-conduct. Okay, take note of that. And that will be all. Okay, so that will be our lesson 3.